Members, I rise tonight in opposition of House File 238. This massive bureaucratic agenda is clearly focused on growing and empowering government, not giving money back to Minnesotans in order to help them be self-sufficient. Our historic surplus should have been the impetus for tax cuts, not massively expanding government and charging the taxpayer for it, and that's exactly what's going to happen. At a time when we have a $19 billion surplus. Brace yourselves, Minnesota, for higher tax cuts. It's going to be necessary to pay for this partisan wish list. As Democrats go on a $72 billion spending spree, yeah, $72 billion. Gosh, that's getting close to $100 billion. And I'm not the greatest at math, but isn't that like 1/10 of $1 trillion? That's the trajectory of government right now in the state of Minnesota. And this bill is no exception. All the while, we are not fully funding nursing homes. And as we learned tonight, we're not fully funding education either. We are not completely eliminating the Social Security tax. And while Minnesotans are truly hurting, our colleagues across the aisle are passing bills that are going to massively raise taxes. Governor Walz is going to spend his days in a mansion that costs $17,000 a month.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
I knew that was coming.
Representative Long, state your point of order.
I'm glad he knew this was coming, but Mason's 114, the character of the executive is not in question, and also Mason's 101, debate must be confined to the question before the body, and the question before the body is not what Representative Davis was referring.
Members, please take your conversations off of the House floor. Representative Davis, please confine your remarks to the question before the body, which is House File 238. Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am. And Representative Long, I broke no such rule. Boy, I might get called out of order a lot tonight. I'll keep going. Because I don't think you like what I have to say. Minnesotans are looking for a responsible budget, and they're looking for meaningful tax relief. See, since I've got here, now I hope it's okay if I share my perception and not get ruled out of order, because that's what I'm going to be speaking to regarding this bill, my perception. There are two philosophies that I've perceived since I've gotten to St. Paul. One philosophy says, let's make government bigger. Government will take care of you. We've got to keep feeding the beast of government. And as government gets bigger and bigger, I tell you one thing big government doesn't like is downsizing. Ever. It just wants to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And as we're seeing here tonight, a $72 billion spending spree moving towards $100 billion budget. Government is certainly doing just that. This idea that government will take care of you, this idea that I perceive as government will be your God. Government will be your savior. Folks, members, the job is already taken. I see this philosophy of government dependency and getting people on the government to take care of them and never getting off of it. And you know what it does? It hurts the hard-working Minnesotan who's trying to get ahead, and their government just keeps pounding them down with more and more taxes and more mandates and regulations. And then I see another philosophy down here. And I will confess right now, this philosophy is not winning out right now. But I'm hoping for that day to come. The day where we do downsize government, the day when we empower the person, the day that we empower we the people to be self-sufficient, not worrying about government taking all of our money for its own will. The government taking the money for wealth redistribution. I mean, we're sitting there in committee in Children's and Family, and we're discussing adding a whole new department called Children, Youth, and Families. And we had a testifier in that committee, members. She was testifying in support of it, and she said this: I have to work just to pay my taxes. That actually came out of her mouth. And I just had to stop my mind for a moment. I was blown away by that statement. I wanted to say, do you not hear the words coming out of your mouth right now? I have to work just to pay my taxes. Folks, when we've arrived at that place as government, as Minnesota, we're in a bad place. We're in a bad place. And then on top of that, we're discussing adding this whole new department in committee, and at about 5 minutes to 10, remember, committee gets done at 10 o'clock. At about 5 minutes to 10, we get to have discussion on it, on adding a whole new department called Children, Youth, and Families, being discussed in the committee, Children and Families. I had a conversation with Representative Daniels after that committee meeting. I said, Brian, I feel like this is something we should have discussed back and forth, had robust debate for at least an entire session of the 93rd legislature. But instead, we had 10 minutes to discuss it, and it moved right along to the next committee. Maybe you don't know this. It's gotten so bad that Minnesota government is the third largest employer in the state right now. That is a fact. Third largest employer. And I believe the governor wants to add like 2,500 or 3,000 new jobs. I wonder where we would be then. I wonder if we would be the number one employer, government, the number one employer in the state of Minnesota. Folks, this is not the way it was meant to be. I have a vision for Minnesota, and I'm sure many of you in this chamber don't care. But if you would just entertain me for a moment. I have a vision for Minnesota where the government gets off the hard-working back, or gets off the back of a hard-working man or woman. See, my vision for Minnesota is that we bring economic prosperity, not government prosperity, to parents in this state. Because if we can bring economic prosperity and opportunity to parents in this state, guess what? That's going to prosper the children. I'm sure you've heard it said that it takes a village to raise a child. You know what? It doesn't. It takes parents to raise a child and to provide for their children. And that's who we should be prospering. That's what government should be protecting. But what I see is, right now, government protecting itself. That is a scary place to be. Government protecting and empowering and growing itself. If you study history, which I would encourage you to do, right, Representative Olson? Study history, because those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. It's a scary place to be when big government gets out of control. History will teach you that does not end well. I do have a vision for Minnesota, and it's to prosper parents. It's to prosper the individual and make them self-sufficient. That's what government should be protecting. You know, there's an old saying from an ancient document that says, you don't work, you don't eat. I was meditating on that saying, and then it hit me, unless you live in Minnesota. Let's reject government sufficiency and let's embrace self-sufficiency tonight, folks. Voting no on this huge spending bill will help us do just that. See, the future I see for Minnesota is one of liberty and prosperity. Liberty and prosperity. Let's unleash Minnesota's potential. With that, I ask that you oppose House File 238. Thank you.